Hey everybody, we're here. Hi Matt.
Hello, everybody on the thing.
If there is anybody yet, we just went live. I'm gonna mess with this a little bit. So I would like you guys to do me a favor, which is if you could listen to my voice and let me know if I'm of lower quality than I normally am.
I have a feeling that there's some kind of psychological effect where everyone's always going to say that you do,
Yeah, sorry,
regardless.
Matt has echoes because of something that should be fixed now. That's my fault. We were testing something, so I turned down his mix minus and forgot to turn it off.
You need to go fix my intro joke now.
What?
You need to go fix my intro joke.
Fix it?
Yeah,
Why? Why?
because it doesn't work yet. The intro joke.
Why doesn't it work yet?
Is it not? Is it funny?
I don't
Okay.
get it, but
Okay, well then it doesn't work.
Matt's echo should be gone now. Please let me know if that's not the case. Thank you. I think I'm going insane or something is happening because I think it's just when you're expecting something to be of lower quality. Now, of course, I reserve the right to um, decide that when I listen to it tomorrow after the edit, it's
Yeah, I mean I've never paid attention to the sound quality too much during the recording. I usually am just like whatever it sounds like during the recording, it's gonna sound different.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. But I mean, I think it's fine because I don't know. I got this new thing that fixed my problem. See, if I take this thing out right now, you're gonna hear. It's really annoying. I got a thing that cleans it up, but I read somewhere that it like lowers bass and stuff, and so like I'm paranoid by plugging my cord into a thing, it's going to lower the overall quality, whether or not that's true or not. So I think I'm just being paranoid. Anyway, yeah, I moved my setup around because I want other people to be able to sit in my room and record with me. So now my desk is facing another chair where someone else will record when I'm there. So that behind me is my movie shelf with a bunch of movies.
it's a good view.
No books. There's right there some Star Trek and some Breaking Bad. And I need to deal with the lighting in here because when I moved, the light is shining right off the top of my head. It's very shiny.
In my house, there's no actual light in this room, so you're always
Is it just a
seeing
desk lamp?
lamp light. Yes,
Doesn't look bad.
because as you can see, they now just install the
Yeah,
opportunity for
you
a
got to
light
do
in the
that
ceiling.
yourself. I've
Yeah,
installed one of those before. They're not too bad.
yeah.
My shelf goes all the way up. Look at all those movies. Scott, stop buying movies.
Most of the movies I bought recently have been on streaming platforms anyway. So
Yeah, I'm still a physical media guy. I can't help it. Yes, there's also a Captain America. There's two Captain Americas and a Spider Gwen.
how do you people see that? It just looks like colors to me.
Wow, I'm worried. I'm very worried.
Pretty sure it's not my eyes. Now I'm blowing up the screen so that I can look at your movies.
I think they're talking about the figures, not the actual movies.
Ah, yes. I
Yeah,
see them.
it's a lot of movies. I have it's not even all of them. It's a lot. I guess we should get started, huh?
I guess.
There's more over there.
Are you gonna fix the joke that's not funny that you don't even get? You need to fix it.
Well, you can't just like you can't just write a joke and then say Scott fix it in the 11th hour.
Look, this just make something funnier here, and then it will make sense.
I wasn't looking at the sheet. Where's here? Oh, um, Well, shit, that's the hardest part.
Exactly. Okay, so it's
Okay, let me think here. This is live. We've got Ward writing.
I mean, it just has to be funny nonsense, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unless unless it's still just bad.
The problem with the joke is I would never say these words, so it feels written.
Okay. Well, what would you say?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. See, I don't think that's very funny, but apparently you do.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay.
All right.
Wait. Is that better?
I don't know. I can't tell.
Um, I think it's better the other way because it flows
I,
less well.
yeah, I agree. It sounds completely wrong, and is that's an extra aspect of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Cool. Hey, we did it, guys. I know that meant nothing to any of you. That's great. That's what we call entertainment in
Yeah.
the biz.
Yeah,
Two
you get to
guys
watch.
writing a joke without sharing anything.
Yeah.
I need to move this down. I feel like what happens with the mic where it is it like makes my neck disappear and I just look like a necklace thing. All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's start our recording, even though mine might be bad quality. I don't even know anymore. I don't know. Let me do something. I'm gonna do two things. Okay, I have clicked record.
Mine is doing the thing again.
Oh, good. We love
So,
the thing.
so I'm gonna restart again. Be right back.
Okay. Don't you have to hang up to be right back?
I do. It's hanging. It's doing it. It's being a piece of shit.
Sweet. It's a day of everything going wrong so far. See, this is driving me crazy because I feel like my recording quality is lower than this quality, which makes no sense. See, this is driving me crazy because I feel like my recording quality is lower than this quality, which makes no sense. Actually, that sounded okay. I'm happy with that. Crisis averted. Oh no, you can see our inside conversation where we make fun of you. So my new setup, the computer's over here instead of over here, and it's really throwing me off. This whole thing's throwing me off. I don't know when he's gonna be back. How's everyone doing this fine Tuesday? since there's nothing going on while I wait right now. Might as well talk to you people. Matt actually bought a green screen, so he has one already for his side. Is that gonna fix it?
Let me hit record. Yep, it's good.
Cool. I also hit record. Wow, why is it so loud? What the? I'm so discombobulated by everything in my setup being different, and it's okay. I can fix it. I can fix this in post. Let me just crank this down a little bit. Just gonna crank this little knob down. Nope, more knob. More. Okay. Let me check some settings. This looks good. This looks good. All right, I think we are finally ready to go. Thanks for rubbing it in, Slim Jim. But just so you know, Matt has definitely already read the chapter. Like, I don't think Matt has been capable of waiting one day ever.
No, it's part of my character, guys.
Yeah, that's why you do it.
Yeah. Okay, I am ready.
I am ready too. All right, let's go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to We've Got Ward, a Daily Planet Productions podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is... Oh, shit, Scott. We forgot to come up with our team name.
Oh, and now we're down to the wire. Okay, how about Team Picard Deontology?
Ah, yes, perfect. Meaningful name which requires no explanation.
Yes, indeed. This is the weekly podcast where you and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of floppy skin monsters, breakthroughs, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, the torch continues with Chapter 7.7 and 7.8. Victoria has a heated confrontation with Chris after showing up unannounced to his home, and Team Breakthrough finally gets its name. Rest in peace, Misfit Toys.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to retire it. We can't just keep calling it that.
No, what I mean, how are we known to continue calling something by a certain way after we've been told that that's not what it's called? I don't think we've ever done that.
And we're certainly not ones to beat a joke into the ground.
No, so. I'm insulted that you would assume that.
No,
frankly.
Yeah, well, right back at you. This was a pretty cool couple of chapters. We get to see some more of this setting that we've that you know, it's being teased out to us, that this existence of corner worlds, and we finally kind of get to poke our nose in one, and I thought that was pretty fun, actually.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to this when we talk about the arc as a whole when we're done with it, but I've really enjoyed just the slow build nature of each of these chapters so far. Like, we go very slowly through exploring these different characters and different people, and I really like how we're doing this.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on into our discussion this week. So first, let's do our community spotlight, where we read what people wrote from last week's thread. And if you'll recall, the discussion question was, is Victoria in danger of becoming an enabler? EXE JPEG WMV says probably not. And they say, Victoria seems a little too aware of people's potential for a downward spiral to occur for her to go too long without intervening. But they go on to say that It's not impossible though. She may well do so unintentionally just because she doesn't know certain members of the team very well.
Yeah. And I think it's that last part of that statement that is most important to me, is that this acknowledgement that I don't think her enabling would be conscious. I don't think her enabling would be intentional, but I think it would come from a lack of understanding of these people and how to deal with them. She's put a lot on her shoulders. She put a lot on her plate, and she doesn't quite know the right way to approach a lot of these people, as we see in this week's chapter.
Hmm.
So I don't think we meant by this question anything necessarily bad, intentionally bad about Victoria or her behavior, just accidental oopsie kind of enabling.
Yeah, right. More like just her background, like tactics that she's employing. Are they adequate to this task, or is she going to accidentally, through some of her personality traits or mistakes, serve as an enabler? But I mean, it's interesting to see how people interpret it anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Which leads us to Madness Factory, who says yes. They say, I think Victoria doesn't have the information she needs to act as a responsible leader. Sure, she has befriended and empathizes with most of the Misfit toys, but she doesn't know them as patients or problems, and it causes her to be blind of the toys potentially relapsing into old habits. But they said that their money is on Victoria figuring out, hopefully soon, that she doesn't really understand most or any of the Misfit toys. That last statement ends up being pretty prophetic, because Victoria states in these very chapters we're talking about this week that she doesn't get Chris. It's an acknowledgement that she does not understand him, that she hasn't figured him out yet, and is having a lot of trouble doing so. And I think that's pretty central to the interaction that happens between the two of them.
Yeah, I think that, like this next person's Noct and Nabel says, they argue that like Taylor justified bad behavior for good reasons, Victoria is justifying permissiveness within her team, and Noct points out that nothing really bad has happened thus far, but it could, and I think that's interesting because it sort of depends on what you weigh as being really bad, because basically two of the team members have already kind of gone down. I mean, it could have been worse, but they've sort of lost two team members for the time being. And you could argue that it was exactly this kind of permissiveness born of not wanting to push too hard, which led to her not really knowing them and understanding them, that led to that happening. So I think it's all kind of related. Like you can't just say, yeah, the problem is that she doesn't know them, but the reason she doesn't know them is that she's too hands off, and almost I happen to think she's like afraid of pushing them away or scaring them off.
Right.
So she comes off as very like, well, I don't want to pry, and I'm certainly not going to ask any of the other team members what the problems are. And I tried to ask Jessica, and she kind of was really cryptic. So I'm just going to sort of continue on and try to ask leading questions, and then if they stonewall me, which they all usually do, then I guess I'll just completely continue to operate in the dark. Like it's not a great position, but you have to wonder, like, is she right in her kind of hands off approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most telling thing to me, and I think we're kind of jumping the gun to a lot of the conversations we're going to have this week, is each one of these people has different problems. Each one of these people has different solutions to hopefully deal with those problems, but she's approaching them all with like, this didn't work for this person, or I failed to do this for Ray, and I failed to do this for Ashley. Therefore, I can't fail to do this for Victoria. I can't fail to do this for Chris. And they have completely different problems, completely different issues, and a one size fits all approach is not great.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And she's kind of talked to them in order of her comfort with them, which is seemingly leaving Chris for last because she's the least comfortable. But I think we have some indications that Chris is not someone that should be left for last, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lastly, Shinichi says she's not there yet, but it could be far too easy for her to get there. They point out that with Victoria's desire to become someone who is hyper-vigilant and removed from a tense situation, someone who can see people when they are cracking and risking becoming like Amy, she's ironically setting herself up to be blindsided by exactly that. She kind of wants it both ways. Shinichi is arguing that she wants to be that outside perspective, that outside observer, but she also wants to be a touchstone for her teammates. And by wanting to do both these things, she's kind of setting herself up for potential blind spots where she thinks she's outside and reserved, but she's actually in too deep. And I like that idea that, like, I think this echoes a lot of the other points, which is that none of this enabling would be intentional on Victoria's part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this element that she pretended to be distant from the team for a really long time and to have this like coach relationship, but also it was always kind of clear that she kind of needed it, and she couldn't just be like, look, I need to know what your deal is, or I'm not going to be comfortable working with you and I'm going to have to walk. She's basically the whole time never been able to make that kind of ultimatum. It's always just been like, yeah, well, I understand everybody has their boundaries, so I guess I'm along, even though for all I know, all of you are secret murderers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to think about, even if she didn't really make any terrible mistakes. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so moving on to the general discussion from last week's thread and the events surrounding last week's post. So recall there was a lot of talk about eclipse, and a couple people pointed out that the formal literary name for the mirrored palindrome-esque structure is chiastic structure, and it's most commonly seen in the Bible, actually, or as the white squirrel says, Harry Potter. They go on to point out that in the Hebrew Bible, the center is considered the most important parts of the text, which would support the idea that Jay, and more specifically Ashley's relationship with Jay, is the key to the entire arc.
Yeah, isn't that? I thought that was a cool thing to kind of circle back and finally maybe complete our discussion of Eclipse, since we just don't want to let this arc go. But yeah, I think it's cool that I was not aware. I think I've heard of that kind of structuring in the Bible before, but I had never heard of the specific term and did not think of it when we were discussing this. So it's cool to know that.
Yeah, I remember it from when somebody said that the Star Wars prequels and like the Star Wars prequels basically formed kind of a chiastic mirror of the original trilogy.
The damn ring theory.
Yeah, I think that's more or less what the ring theory is getting at.
Yeah.
But then Red Letter Media made a really good video about that being silly. So anyway.
No, it's like poetry.
Yeah. It rhymes both forward and backward and upside down. All right. Let's get on into our chapter discussion, Scott.
All right.
So here we go, chapter 7.7. And this chapter cold opens with Victoria doing some aerial sparring with Crystal.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed this opening. We once again kind of start in media res with a pace and tone that almost implies Victoria is like mid-battle, and we're almost immediately like, oh shit, what's up? But then we shift down from that to Victoria like musing about the mode that driving requires and how flying has its own mode that she has to shift into, and the casual nature of which Victoria's narrative sets this scene up as. You're kind of like, wait, what's going on here? She was fighting, but now she's like casually musing about driving versus flying. What's up? And then, of course, Crystal is revealed and it all becomes clear. And I think this is really just like a great example of how writing can manipulate your emotions. Like I think we tend to use the word manipulate when talking about art negatively, and I don't like that, Matt, because like all art is manipulative. That's what it's trying to do. Like art is an empathy machine. Stories are an empathy machine, and they're trying to make you feel a certain way, and they do that by manipulating you with the words. And so I like reject this idea that I basically use this as a platform to whine about people calling movies and books manipulative, because they all are. This is what they do.
Yeah. I kind of wish we had like a connotationally neutral word that meant the same thing as manipulative, because like everything is manipulative. A conversation is manipulative. You're trying to manipulate the other person's mind into knowing the information that you're telling them. I mean, it's Yeah, it's you're trying to create a certain state in a person, and that's manipulation, sure, but
Yeah.
it's the purpose of the art, more or
Yeah,
less.
it wants you to feel things, so it's going to manipulate you to get to the feelings it wants from you. That is what stories do. I
Yep.
mean, yeah, I see that so much when I'm like reading reviews of books or movies that say, oh, I just felt so manipulated. Like, this is a movie that wants you to cry and it's going to manipulate your emotions. It's like, well, no, it wants you to tell you a sad story. And the result of that sad story will probably be you crying.
Yeah, right. The only time that I don't mind that is when the point is like the attempts at manipulation were obvious and lacking in art.
Right.
Then that's just more like, yeah, well, they just didn't do a good job.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think that's when you break down criticism like that, that's what they're saying is not that the criticism is not that it's manipulated. The criticism is that they didn't do a good job at manipulating you.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
all this to say, I liked the start of this chapter. I kind of went off the rails here a bit, but I enjoyed how this kind of leads you through a gamut of emotions as you're trying to figure out what's going on to begin the chapter.
Yeah, me too. Um, so yeah, so they're sparring, and Victoria gets a bit bruised due to not having told Crystal about the wretch, and thus Crystal was attacking at closer to full strength. And I'm sure this sort of thing where she doesn't tell people about the wretch and then she gets hurt, I'm sure this isn't setting up a pattern, and this choice that she's made won't bite her in the ass in any serious way in the future.
Yeah. There's a moment way back in Arc 3, Chapter 2, and thanks, Prof, for finding the chapter number for me, because I couldn't find it. I just remember this happening. But Sveta is pointing out how strong her body is, how strong her armor is, basically. And Victoria kind of thinks to herself, well, when people know you're really tough, they tend to go harder on you. They tend to go all out. They don't hold back. And we're kind of seeing that circle around to Victoria here. Everyone that knows Victoria pre Gold Morning knows her as this indestructible heroine with the shield that a lot of people think can't be knocked off. And they treat her that way. And that's just not true anymore. She can't leave her shield up all the time anymore. It's just not how it works. And it's her, like, we're seeing again and again this reticence to share the truth about the wretch with the people that she knows. And I think it's very understandable from an emotional level why she does that, but it is getting increasingly more and more dangerous as you're around more and more people that knew you from back then and are going to treat you as if you are still that person. And yeah, I think you're right. We're being kind of subtly like pushed in the direction of really thinking about this and thinking where this could go.
Yeah, it reminds me of what happened to her originally, where the Slaughterhouse Nine managed to really grievously injure her. And that wasn't even people who were holding back. I think what's interesting here is we're setting up a situation where even someone holding back could end up hurting her fairly devastatingly, because they assume she's invulnerable, and that's
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I think we're putting here.
I think you are correct.
So the two cousins chat a bit about family stuff, like how they used to all fly in formation.
I I really love, Matt, when the story stops to place an emphasis on the familial aspect of these two characters. I think family is such a rocky, complicated thing for Victoria, but Crystal seems to be the one exception to that rule. And it's the one person in her family that she's mostly comfortable around. And I think we have to remember that hanging out with Crystal, when at the end of the last chapter, when Victoria listed this long list of stuff that she had to do, this incredibly long list of stuff that included possibly preventing the end of the world, one of the things she listed was making time for her cousin. And here we see that she's doing that. I think this shows just how much importance she places on this relationship with her cousin. And I think this conversation is especially impactful when you realize that the people that Crystal is talking about in it are dead, with the exception of Carol, her mom, her brother. Their family has gotten wrecked, and Crystal brings them up here. She's the one that brings them up. There's no real reticence to bringing them up. There's only this one brief moment where she says little brothers are a pain, and she smiles with a little bit of melancholy behind it. And I don't think this is to say that Crystal isn't suffering the trauma of what happened to her family. She absolutely is. We saw her reaction to death very early in the book and what it did to her. And I think that's probably connected to how many people in her family she's lost. But I think we're seeing her deal with it at a level that, like, is someone that's doing the right things and dealing with the things that have happened to her in a good way. She's able to talk about her mom. She's able to talk about her brother. And I think this to me says, this is a person that, Victoria, you need to lean on a bit here. This is a person that could be valuable for you and could help you understand. She's going through stuff herself, and she's gotten to a place where she can at least talk about it publicly and not be completely devastated. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, that is really interesting, and that's not something that I thought a whole lot about. I did actually go back and look at the wiki just to kind of prove to myself how many of Crystal's immediate family were dead, and it's
all of them.
All of them, exactly. And another thing that strikes me, like you just said, that she obviously had trouble at the Broken Trigger event scene, and what's interesting is that, like, most capes in this world now, in this post end of the world, have lost probably several loved ones, but the difference between the average person and Crystal is that Crystal lost most of them in, like, cape combat, and they were capes. So she probably has a lot of specific anxieties surrounding, actual cape combat, not just like, the general trauma of loss. It's loss specifically centered around, costumed heroics. So
yeah,
it is kind of impressive, and I don't know, I suppose admirable that she continues to go at it and to try to do this thing. And yeah, I like this point that that Victoria and her have a lot to learn from each other, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I think that the impetus for this whole interaction is Victoria is worried about Crystal's well-being, and Crystal is probably the exact same for her sister, or for her cousin, rather.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then there's this lovely little beat here before we move on where Crystal and Victoria are talking about how Crystal used her as a surfboard, and she says, like, yeah, that's so much better. And she says, it kind of is, besides no dirt on these feet. And I just like this little bit of detail where, of course, someone who flies would not have dirt on their shoes, because why would you walk around if you can fly? And it's just little beat, like this little, like, common sense of course beat that you probably would never have thought of, but this book does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah, but also, remember when Victoria told how, like, isolating and disconnecting flying can be? I had to remember that, Crystal, mm-hmm. You flyer.
Yeah, it's interesting how that particular motif is being used in this couple of chapters, actually.
Yeah,
it's funny now that you sort of prime me to think about Crystal in this way. I'm wondering if she's doing as well as she seems. But that's of course my constant skepticism of
it's that damn chocolate.
All the characters.
Yeah, we see here that Crystal is on some classified mission that is not classified because they've never used the word classified, but it is secret and she can't tell anyone about it, which is what classified means. Mm-hmm. I think like we're seeing, there's some stuff going on. There's some heavy stuff Crystal's group is doing that she's involved in that we don't know about. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that Crystal is, like, totally mentally healthy and she's the paragon for Victoria to look up to here, but I think they can lean on each other a little more. I think she needs to tell her cousin about the wretch. That's what I'm getting at. She needs to tell this, like, for every reason, for safety, for mental health, for part of their familial bond. That's something that needs to happen.
Yeah, it's almost as if the text wants us to want Victoria to tell people, but then she continues to not do so. No, it wouldn't manipulate us like that, Scott.
No,
that's too manipulative. So now Victoria flies to Chris's orphanage and speaks to Val while she waits for Chris to show up.
Oh, here we go. Before we get into this whole thing, because we've got a lot to say about this, there's one thing I wanted to point out here, because I think we maybe I'll swing back to it a little bit later, but as Victoria flies, she's looking out for random landmarks in the city to orient herself. She points out the portal, she points out Kenzie's areas, the shopping center they broke into, the Norfair community center. It's as if we're like going by the big events of the book, or some of the big events of the book, one by one, before we prepare to move on to the next phase of the story. I liked that little beat.
Yeah, that's a neat. I like that you interpreted it that way. I think it can also be interpreted as just Wildbow is reminding us that this is a setting and that the places are all located relative to each other in a meaningful way. Like, I think we got a really firm sense of the geography of Brockton Bay by the end of that story, by the end of Worm. And I think we're starting to build a sense of how these things are connected to each other, and rather than just being kind of isolated areas. This is like a much more expansive area, so I think it's harder to see them as like, immediately part of the same. Like, they're not really the same city in the same sense that Brockton Bay was a city. But it makes the world feel more put together. It just makes it feel more like a setting that you can exist in.
Yeah.
So now they gossip, her and Val gossip about Chris while both pretending that they respect his boundaries. I kid, kind of, because they both clearly want to know more about his situation, and they're both worried about him, but they're wary of saying too much, so they really just skirt the edge.
Yeah, and I love the way this conversation is kind of constructed. We start by pointing out the reaction Val has when Vicky mentions Chris. Like, her expression immediately changes, and she immediately sends the kid that's playing near them further away so they can talk privately. There's a lot of buildup here, and they are kind of both testing each other. Like, they're talking very in kind of code. They both want to talk about Chris. They both want to learn what the other one has to know about Chris, but as you said, they're both kind of worried that they'll betray his trust and betray his privacy. And it's kind of this push and pull game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's this really interesting moment here where Val says that Chris seems to have the best relationship with her than anyone else in the group, and Victoria's response is, "Maybe because you're pretty," I thought. Then I thought again. Chris seemed like the type to prefer a hard-nosed adult he could predict and rely on over the friendly sort. Maybe it was both. And I think this is so telling to me because she kind of says, maybe it's this thing, or maybe it's this thing, or maybe it's both of them. And I think this is pretty illustrative of the fact that she doesn't get him. She doesn't understand him, and she's guessing at things. She's trying to link things together, but she's not even sure enough to conclude on any one thing. And she's like, well, maybe it's both of the things. And I think this is a pretty good prelude to what exactly is going to go down in this whole conversation.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny that she considers like, oh yeah, he talks to you because you're pretty, and it's like Victoria is frequently described or referred to as being like a bombshell basically, but Chris doesn't give her any special like attention. So the hypothesis that he opens up to pretty women does not seem to have any support for it at all. So. And you'd think that would be something she could figure out if she kind of thought about it, but
she's just pulling at straws here. Like, she's just trying. He's so confused and doesn't know what to make of him, and so she's trying to link anything she can.
Yeah.
I really like, while we're discussing Chris, while these two characters are discussing Chris, we see a child misbehave. We see this kid Sky do something wrong, and Val just handles it. Matt, she just handles it. The kid is ready to fight. It's kicking, it's screaming. She's not listening to reason, and Val just grabs her and just goes into like a straight jacket mode until she's calm.
Yeah, and this is all correct and normal parenting and childcare behavior, of course. Yes.
So we know this woman has a better relationship and a level of trust with Chris that we haven't really seen in anyone in the story thus far. And we've just seen how she handles a difficult situation. And I don't think it's an accident that this is happening while they're having this conversation about Chris. I think we're connecting the dots here. This is how Val handles things. So perhaps this is metaphorically a way that to handle Chris. We see in this moment that Victoria wants to intervene. She says, "Oh, I almost jumped over the fence and came to help out," but she doesn't because she doesn't want to out herself as a cape. But Matt, she's not needed to intervene here. Val had it. Val handled it. Victoria does not understand Skye, this kid, enough to know what the best way in this situation to help is. She doesn't know. Val does. If Victoria were to have intervened in this thing, it could have only made things worse. You kind of see what we're doing here now.
Are you laying out some breadcrumbs for us?
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
All right. I think we'll make this line of thought perfectly concrete in a moment.
Yeah.
But yeah. So they talk about how Chris goes on a lot of long walks, which it's pretty clear they're both aware mean opportunities for him to use his power. They both understand that he needs to use it, and the orphanage gives him allowances to, skirt the rules a bit. The kids and the admins are scared of him, allegedly because it's so apparent that he changes over time. Although I took a bit of a hint that maybe there's more to why they're scared of him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's evidence for that. It's more of an intuition. Also, they've had some thefts of medical supplies, which Victoria strongly suspects were due to Chris, due to her knowledge of his special inclinations toward medicine and keeping his body put together.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot here, man. There's a whole lot. The volunteering and walks, all of this speaks of this really tenuous equilibrium that is established here. That this kind of, okay, we know you need special treatment. It's kind of a live and let live policy that anything could possibly mess up. It's also really sad. Like, it's really sad. Like, this idea that people are scared of him, and you're right. There's hints of other things, but what we're told is people are scared of him not because his behavior, but because of his changing. It creeps people out. It makes people uncomfortable. The things that happens to him. When we'll learn the specifics of how gruesome some of this stuff is a little bit later, but the one thing that he can't control, the one thing that he needs to do, is the thing that's making all these people afraid of him. So, like, the fact that he has any kind of good situation here almost feels like a damn miracle. And anything that could damage that equilibrium could be really bad for Chris, for the people around Chris, for everything. Like, I don't know, for example, like a teammate showing up and confirming basically that the suspected medical equipment theft was probably definitely him, like by silently confirming that could really throw a wrench into everything and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, potentially.
Or maybe the hero work, the moonlighting as a hero thing, when like capes are really not thought of positively right now. I don't know. Just stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because we're in Victoria's head, and it's very easy to, or it's very tempting to dismiss his concerns as, oh, he's just a kid, because that's basically what Victoria does. But also, it doesn't take much, effort of flexing your empathy to realize, just like you said, it probably is very taxing for him and exhausting to try to keep up this balance of his life. And of course, the last thing Val says about him is she describes him as uncanny, but also as desperate. And I guess this is maybe one facet of that desperation, but definitely goes deeper than that, and we're not really privy to what that means exactly.
Yeah, I like those words so much. Uncanny is such a great way of describing Chris. And I love how she describes his desperation too. Like, she says, everyone else here that's desperate for something, I've been able to figure out what that thing is. With this kid, I have no idea. And that ties into the whole uncanny nature of it. It's the mystery that is Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he obviously wants something powers related, but we're still on the hook for what that is.
Yep.
So Chris finally shows up, and he's obviously very angrier than we've ever seen him. And he believes that Victoria is here because she wanted an excuse to snoop, though she claims that she came to deliver the message from the team, since the comms are down and his phone isn't answering. Of course, we know that both are kind of true.
Yeah, in classic Wild Bow complex situation creating, it's both.
Yeah.
I really love the writing here though. Like the front door of the building slammed. Chris just stood beyond the doors looking for me, finally spotting me. Oh, he looked pissed. The front door slams. Like the oh, he looked pissed is such a wonderfully constructed, simple, and effective sentence. And once again, if we can drive down into the meaning of individual words, I love how putting "oh" before he looked pissed kind of warps the meaning of this statement here. Because like if you just said he looked pissed, that would just be kind of a statement of fact here. But putting the "oh" before it adds some of Victoria's mindset here. It puts in a little bit of her thinking. Like this almost seems like a, oh, here we go. This is kind of what I was worried might happen going into this, and we're here now. And I think it's just a like this simple word that just enhances the sentence so much.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I don't have anything to add there. It's just, yeah, it feels more emotional. Yeah, so Chris storms out of the orphanage, making Victoria follow, um, and he continues to become angrier and angrier as she pushes back and maintains that she needs to keep an eye on him. And he eventually gets angry enough to go for a weak point, bringing up Amy as a weapon.
Oh shit! That was the jaw drop. Now you done it moment of the chapter.
Yeah. And but like in this tirade, he's also angry enough to say more than he usually would say, and he reveals that his body is kind of a mess, and he leaves weird internal bodily fluids on his bed sheets, and he poops out blood and meat. And Victoria guesses that maybe it's somebody else's power at work, which we don't really get confirmed other than like a look from him. And because in her mind, powers don't usually mess up their hosts like that.
Yeah, and once again, the mystery that is Chris deepens. Do you have any kind of guess as to what could be going on here at all? I have not been able to like tie anything together here.
No, not really. I mean, I feel like we're being led to that answer of maybe he has his own power and then there's another power working on him and he's
Yeah,
having to put himself back together using his power, and it's kind of like a constantly losing battle, which is why his body keeps changing constantly over time and he loses teeth and stuff. Um, and he's just trying to keep himself alive, and that's hence the
yeah,
desperation. But I feel like there's obviously a lot more details than that, and some of what I just said could still be wrong. So
yeah, yeah.
probably worth pulling this out because it comes up again later. So Chris is so mad that he says, referring to Amy, "I'll go to her for help before I go to you. I'd go to Bonesaw if she was still around." I shook my head, walking away. He raised his voice. "You want to push me? I'll push back." I stopped in my tracks. "That kind of pushing gets you killed," I said, "or worse."
Yeah, we'll circle back around to that brilliantly constructed exchange by Victoria there in a minute, but this is kind of where this conversation ends. And it's about this moment. Like, I think it was right before this moment where, or right after, where Chris decides to reveal the building that Amy lives at, and as much as we've seen Victoria make progress as far as Amy is concerned when she brings her up, this stops her in her tracks. This hits her hard. This is so debilitating to her. She says, "I didn't want to know where she lived." And I have to go back to, this is why I brought this up earlier, because we had this moment where Victoria was flying through the city and pointing out landmarks and places that she's been and knows before. And now a new landmark has just been added to her list. A new thing, whenever she flies through the city, she will see and know what is there and know who is there, and it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you've pointed that out because while she just knows Amy is somewhere, then she doesn't have to think of her existence concretely. But now she
Right.
knows, like, oh, yep, she's there. She's a person. She's right there. I could stumble across her anytime I'm in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. So Matt, Chris, and Victoria, let's talk about this because I was kind of surprised to see how much argument and like fighting that occurred in the community and controversy that this whole fight had than I figured there would be when I first read it. There are people out there that are convinced that Victoria was absolutely within her rights to come to the orphanage and check on Chris, and that he was completely out of line and childish and wrong in reacting the way that he did. There are people that think what Victoria did was way over the line and not cool at all, and Chris was well within his rights to fight back. My opinion is both of those are right. Here's what I think about this, and you can let me know what you think. But I think Victoria came here with wonderful intentions. She was worried about Chris. She was admittedly afraid of failing him the way that she feels like she failed both Rain and Ashley. Although, interesting enough, the two people that are in jail are like the two characters that I'm the least concerned about right now, which I don't know if that says something. But anyway, I don't think she has the right to show up unannounced here, but I could see a case where she feels like it is her responsibility. Chris could hurt himself. Chris could hurt others. And she's here because she cares for him.
Yeah, I think her intentions are definitely good. I think that other people have made this comparison in the discussions, but I think like, and I guess I'm not really gonna come down too hard on either side of the argument per se, other than to point out that this is a very Carol move right here to be like, but I have the best intentions at heart. Also, I know better because I'm older.
Yeah.
And therefore I can basically cross boundaries because you're a kid and you don't really know what you're doing, and you say that's a boundary, but you don't really understand what you're saying, and I'm just going to take care of you, and I need to be the one who takes care of you. And that's kind of exactly what she's doing, and it's kind of exactly what her mom is doing to her. And Victoria's like inner monologue about this is like exactly what you imagine Carol's to be, which is just like, brat, like yeah. why don't you listen to me? I'm just trying to take care of you.
Yeah.
And why are you lashing out at me so cruelly when I'm just trying to take care of you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Victoria handled, with best intentions, handled this whole thing really shitty, like really bad. And as we indicated earlier, and as the chapter was kind of pushing us to realize, is how little she understands Chris, how little she gets him, how little she knows how to approach him, knows how to get to him. And man, she just shows up and tries to brute force her way into fixing the problem, and it just doesn't work. And I'm not saying because she doesn't understand him, because she doesn't have the tools, it doesn't mean that she shouldn't try. But she kind of like puts her head down and just keeps charging forward, even when it's very clear that her tactic is not working here.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting. We don't really, until she gets angry, we don't really know what exactly her tone is in this conversation. And it's kind of up to you to fill in what it is based on what we know of her.
Yeah.
And I wonder what kind of the median reader assumes for her tone for this scene.
Yeah, I mean, I in the Carol way, I thought it was very kind of, I don't want to say condescending, but I think it was very authoritarian, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm in the right here, and I don't know why you're being unreasonable. That was kind of how I read it too.
And look, was Chris's reaction too strong? Yeah. Did he cross a line by bringing Amy into things? Yeah. He's a total asshole here. But he's not entirely wrong either. We noted how the chapter made pains to show us kind of how tenuous this relationship is, how the people that he's living with don't like him for the most part. They mostly put up with him. And I'm sure a lot of these people would jump at the opportunity to remove the problem, and any kind of introduction of new stuff to this equilibrium could mess it up. So like, Victoria does not fully understand that. She does not understand the precariousness of the situation before she brute force her way into it. And so, yeah, he's pissed off. He's rightly pissed off. And he wanted to make Victoria angry, and he knew just how to do it. And look, it worked. It absolutely worked.
Yeah, I mean, it even made sense to him in the sense where he's like, if you're going to cross my boundaries, I know where your boundaries are.
Right.
So, let's. I'm not saying he's being like rational here, but there is a certain logic to being like, you know, I'm going to incentivize you to back off and
Yeah.
stay backed off.
Well, I mean, that beautiful line where he mentions Amy and she says, "Don't go there," and his response is perfect. Is "Don't come here." Like that's if Amy is your line. Look, this is mine,
Yeah.
and look, Chris is a 13-year-old kid. Like he's going through some shit, and he's a kid. His body, Matt, is changing in weird ways that he doesn't fully understand yet. Yeah, it's puberty. It's like a metaphor. Anyway, he's going through this big thing and he's a kid and Victoria isn't equipped to help him with it. I love that we kind of even reinforce here that he is a child. Like, yes, I think this is kind of Victoria dismissing him a little bit when he says there are times when he seemed so adult and there was times when he seemed so young. This was the latter. And that's true. Chris kind of threw a little temper tantrum here, but he is a kid. Victoria is older, and Victoria, by assuming the role of coach, of leader, of person that is going to help the rest of the team solve problems, when she assumes that responsibility, she has to also then assume responsibility to the idea that when things go wrong, she might be to blame for them. And I just think she messed up this so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I love this as an example of one of Wildbow's like conundrums that have no solution and thus breed endless debate
Right.
because like it's certainly not a fictional problem to be like, here is subject A, 13-year-old, male or female, doesn't matter, doesn't want you in their business, has drawn out their boundaries, but they're 13 and you know they're dumb. How do you respond to this situation?
Right.
I mean, that's the conundrum of every parent of a teenager, basically. Except now they're superpowers, which is why this is parahumans, is it
Yeah.
superpowers as metaphors for things normal
Exactly.
people go through.
Yeah.
So
I think I think one of the most important beats of Victoria not handling this super well is um Amy is brought up and he's angry and she follows him down that anger tunnel just like he wanted her to. And she gives that threat which we'll talk about that a little later, but he interprets as a threat. I don't think she actually meant it like that, or she did, but not a threat coming from her, a threat coming from somewhere else. And then she says this thing like you better watch out for yourself because I don't want Kenzie and Sveta to have to mourn for you, kind of indicating that I don't give a shit if you die. It's those two that do. And then she leaves. And this is, I think, like he there's something really interesting here where he says train stations this way. And that's when she says walk fast. Here's where you got to be. I'm leaving. And then she really leaves. This line where he says train station is this way, as if to say, are you coming? As if to say, even after all of this, he wasn't going to be the one to storm off alone. He was still going to be around her, even if he's pissed off at her. But she leaves. And I think her getting so angry that she leaves, and even as she says for his sake, is probably, like, in my opinion, one of the worst mistakes she makes here. Because if we go back to this Val and Sky comparison where we had Sky basically this little girl throwing a temper tantrum and Val just like grips her and holds on to her until she calms down. What if in that situation Sky had like kicked Val in the arm or something and hurt her, and Val got pissed off and said, "Fine, if this is what you want, do it," and then just left. Like what? Like that would have been a terrible. Like any parent would look at that and say, that's probably not how you should have handled that. And since we're drawing comparisons to how she handled this, I think we have to draw that further out here to say like, you probably shouldn't have just flown away in this moment. Like it was probably not long term the best solution.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you pointed out this motif of the flying being a mode of separation in this very chapter, and we're using not, she doesn't just storm away, she flies away. It's like a perfect underlining of this idea of
Hmm.
I am choosing separation.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's kind of where I end with this whole thing is like, sh- do I respect Victoria for being concerned about Chris, both for him and because of him, and wanting to see if she could figure him out and learn more about him? Yeah, absolutely. I think she means well here. She's trying to look out for people. She's trying not to she's trying to help protect people. That's great. Um, but she messes this up. She really does. And Chris isn't perfect here either. I don't want to make it seem like I don't think we need to be on a team here. I think this was a messy conversation where two people got emotional and said things they probably shouldn't have, and that's where we left it. Like I don't think we have to declare a winner and a loser of every single conversation.
Yeah, it's just still definitely been fascinating to see the the debate over this.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like this is one of those things that's going to continue too because it's kind of timeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now Victoria, she leaves. She flies to the portal where she meets up with the team who are having an important discussion about back hair.
This back hair conversation is like a pretty good release of tension after the drama of the Chris Victoria fight, but I think it's doing a lot of cool things at the same time. Like it's one of those things. I'm going to talk about this for a bit, which seems ridiculous because it's back hair, but I I I, I think how each of these characters react to back hair is like a way to fit into both of their personality, the definitions of them as a character, and the things that they are going through. Sveta is okay with it because Weld has back metal, and perhaps because for someone like Sveta, judging people by their physical appearance is probably something she's not like super down with. That would make sense as a thing Sveta wouldn't love to do. Kenzie is okay with it because her favorite people have it, which Sveta interprets as older people, ergo inappropriate for her to be calling them her favorite people, which perfectly ties back to Kenzie's historical issues with inappropriate behavior around older men that has gotten them in trouble. Byron and Tristan are fighting over the guy who had it, thus illustrating their continued internal, I guess you can call it an internal conflict. It's not really,
Yeah,
but I guess we'll call it that here.
sure.
Um, Victoria hates back hair. Why? Why would Victoria not like things growing out of people?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like this perfect encapsulation of all these. I just the smallest things can do so much.
yeah. No, I think that's it's pretty funny that I like that connection with Victoria in particular. But yeah, no, it's just another great kind of tension diffusing moment where we're once again reinforcing who these characters are through something mundane and then kind of clearing the palette for the next thing to happen.
Hmm.
And of course, that next thing is that they move into enemy territory.
Yeah, and as we finish this chapter, um, I really like this idea that they're in the city, which is technically a home for Victoria. She calls it stressful and overbearing. The accumulated stresses were weighing on me, and it was hard to breathe. And then she moves into Earth N, a place of fresh air, trees, birds, and fields. This thing that you would traditionally consider like serene and peaceful, but this is enemy territory. This is where the bad guys are, and I like
Yeah,
that kind of dichotomy there.
yeah, that's the last line of the chapter is enemy territory, right? Where like she's describing it as this beautiful place, and it's it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah, we move on into 7.8, and Victoria is now mentioning that Chris will probably still be pissed when he shows up, basically priming everyone to expect that when he comes, and they have a little discussion of kind of team dynamics. Sveta says that she can relate to Victoria's concerns, recalling how she regrets not paying attention to more of the red flags with the irregulars that she witnessed. And all the team members feel like they missed opportunities to stop bad stuff from happening with Ashley and Rain.
Yeah, and I think this is why things are so complicated. This is why I don't think Victoria was wrong in what she did, merely how she did it. Chris says he's fine. He's not. None of these people are fine, but there are the correct ways to help them and look after them, and there are the incorrect ways. I think the most important thing to me here was Victoria admitting to the team, admitting publicly that she doesn't really get Chris yet, and that she could have handled things better. She took responsibility. She realized that did not go well. She realized she could have been the one to handle it better. She takes responsibility for that. That's good. That's good. We see here that at least one good thing that came out of this encounter between the two of them was that she learned something.
Yeah.
I really like this. There's a beat here where they ponder if the reason Chris was so angry was because of some rage emotion induced stuff based on his form changing. And Victoria kind of like dismisses that. Like she says her gut says, I don't feel like it was connected to that. I think this is intriguing and part of the whole Chris mystery, but I think it's another point I'm going to award to Victoria here. She's calmed down a bit and she's in a place of understanding where she thinks she gets why Chris was so mad. Like, I understand why what I did upset him so much that I don't think this was a Powers-produced emotion. This was just him angry. And I think, again, that's showing that she has processed something in this conversation.
She also doesn't, like, she understands that, yeah, I don't understand him. This happened because I took the wrong approach. And she also doesn't jump to any kind of like, oh, well, next time it'll be better because I'll just take this other approach. It's like she really is just trying to be cautious. And she's like, I don't know what the approach is here.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, when Chris finally shows up, it actually seems like the thing he wants to focus on is the perceived threat that she made in parting, which was not what she meant. So when he basically accuses her of threatening him with death, he says, go on. I really want to hear how you justify it. And then she says, going to Bonesaw for help before you went to me out of spite, that's the kind of thing that gets you killed or worse. So basically he's apparently been stewing on this misperception of what she said for this whole, half hour. I forget how long it was exactly, this whole train ride. And she could have averted that misunderstanding. She just hung around for a minute, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really great that we do this because I think one thing you and I have talked about a lot so far in this book is perception and how perception alters how we look at everything, because that's what perception means. Anyway, it influences how we communicate and the results of that communication. I can fully understand that when Victoria said this, Bonesaw killing Chris was absolutely what she meant. And maybe a little bit of Amy too. Like, she didn't say Amy, but come on.
Right.
But I also fully understand how Chris would hear this and interpret it that way, interpret it as a direct threat to him. And that's what happens when we get in these heated, angry conversations is things break down, communication breaks down. We start thinking with our emotions rather than with our brains, and we perceive things in a way that matches with our anger. So pissed off Chris said, absolutely, she just threatened me. And Victoria is fully unaware that it was interpreted that way until, hey, they calm down and maybe talk this part out logically.
Yeah.
And he accepts it. He believes her here, right? He says, I believe you. I believe that that's what you meant, that you did not mean it as a threat. And this is kind of the conclusion of this fight for now, that they've reached a tenuous peace agreement. And I appreciate that Victoria realized she was wrong. I appreciate that Chris didn't try to push the issue and say, no, that's not what you meant, that he accepted this, that he was our characters have calmed down a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes us like Chris a bit, that even though he lost his temper there, he is capable of calming down, and he still stays a bit angry at her for the rest of this kind of chapter. But I don't think it influences their teamwork, which I think is the important thing,
Yeah.
and that's what makes us, you know, like him a bit more here.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
There's a beat here that I wanted to point out,
sure.
where they're talking about Chris and the communication problems with getting a hold of him because his phone was dead and internet in the area was down. And Kenzie says, "I could do a phone thing," and Victoria responds, "You're doing too many things," which was so good to hear.
Yeah.
And Kenzie responds, "But this is important," which is the same line of argument she made when they wanted to break into the building. But this is important, and they still kind of halt her here, and that was encouraging.
Yeah.
Now we'll see if they actually like mean it until the
Right.
next big crisis comes up and Kenzie can solve it, and they say, "Okay."
Yeah. Or if she shows up with the phone thing and she's like, "Yeah, I did it, and I had to pull 3 all-nighters to do it," and then they just accept it.
Yeah, yeah. There's also a moment here where Chris explains why his phone was dead. That he went out in the middle of the night. He went for one of his walks. He changed into quiet awe and listened to music and shut out the world. He claims that he got back at around 1 a.m., but he wasn't sure because the power was off. We know from Val that it was closer to 2:30 a.m. And this makes the paranoid person in me like wonder if Chris is not being entirely honest here. Like I don't have any reason to believe this other than I'm kind of want to believe it because I'm so confounded by this kid.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't have any specific reason to like be suspicious about a lie of
Yeah.
like an hour and a half. Like why wouldn't he just tell her you got back at 2:30? Or
Well, because he might literally
he
just
just
not
doesn't
know.
care. Yeah, or
Yeah.
he doesn't know or care, and he's just like, I don't know, late. Yeah, I mean that's what seems most likely to me. Although it would be interesting if it were some kind of
Yeah.
horrific twist.
This is my Byron's chocolate. Just let me have it.
That's fine. I love that you have a Byron's chocolate also. My Byron's chocolate is Byron's chocolate.
It's Byron's chocolate.
Yeah. So they mosey into Earth End together. And it turns out this is a corner world controlled by Lord of Loss, with about 150,000 settlers, most of them clustered around the portal. And apparently it's a rougher existence out there. We get the description: roofs were often corrugated steel. I saw houses with additions that were plywood with plastic tacked to them. Others were best described as cabins. So yeah, this is not, and specifically she thinks about how the materials for construction in Earth Gimel were basically put there before Gold Morning, so they were ready, whereas places like this are kind of ramshackle because they're being made from scrap almost. So it's a very different feel of the settlement.
Yeah, yeah.
And Victoria notes some people with minor injuries as they make their way in.
Yeah, I'm glad you pulled all this out because what we're doing is here we're drawing a distinct difference in the way of life compared to things back on Gimel. The subtle beats here, the injuries, we'll learn later they're defensive injuries. We're kind of showing what the cost of this way of life is. This kind of reminded me of like what Warlord Skitter's goal was realized on a large scale. Like 150,000 people, like relative to other establishments, is not that big, but to be under control of one team and basically one man, that's like pretty impressive to do that. And Victoria describes it like we're seeing like suffering and injuries and describes it despite the fresh air as a strained and desperate atmosphere. And this got me wondering if like we're going to see more comparison between life on Earth N and contrast it with what's happening on Gimel, what's happening in the city, and as things are escalating there and collapsing. Like, are we gonna see a comparison to how like the warlord way of life survives crisis versus what they were going for in the city? There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the story goes that way. It's definitely this whole concept of the corner worlds I always thought was a fascinating aspect of this setting, and I'm happy to see that we're touching on it now in the narrative.
Yeah.
So yeah, they find an alley in which to change into their costumes. Chris explains that he's going to be using strained peace, and what's interesting here is Victoria asks, "What does that mean?" And he kind of gives her a glare, and you think he's not going to answer because he's mad at her. And this is kind of that moment where he does answer, and it's like, oh, okay, so he's even though he's mad, he's cooperating, and I think that goes a long way. So anyway,
Yeah.
he explains that strained is a modifier to the forms along the lines of like repressed anger, tense acceptance, paralyzed fear, stifled disgust. So basically, it's like a slant on the underlying form that gives it faster reaction times and more durability at the cost of lower stamina and strength.
Everybody upgrade your spreadsheets accordingly. We got some more Chris information
Yep,
here.
got another dimension.
Yeah. I really love this beat where they walk out of the alley and everyone sees them in their cape costumes and everything stops dead. Like they read some people as open hostility. They like some people are just concerned, but everyone looks at them. Sveta describes this as similar to what would happen with the irregulars when they would walk in. This is similar to when a bunch of Case 53s would walk into a place and people would stare and look at them like that. But these aren't monstrous capes. These are just capes. And I think while Earth N might be different, I have a feeling that the general anti-cape sentiment that's going on might be just as strong here, if not stronger. And we could see this being like the escalating point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're seeing more notes of that torch theme of the peasants with their torches and
Yeah,
pitchforks.
yeah,
Hasn't gotten quite to the point of open combat that we've seen. But yeah, there's a lot more hostility than we've seen at this point in the story.
yeah. And then we get Chris's reveal of his strained peace form, which I'm not going to read all of this, but how did we have an entire conversation about Wildbow's descriptive writing and not talk about the descriptions of Chris's forms? I don't know how we
Yeah,
dropped that ball.
yeah. Well, I mean, that just, I guess, a brief aside. Like, there's a difference between the fact that Wildbow can imagine incredibly engrossing things and and like the craft of describing those things. Those are two
Yeah.
different skills, and he's good at both of them. So I don't know, that just
Yeah.
popped into my head, and I thought it was interesting.
It's a monster shrouded with skin.
like a like a robe that you could mistake for clothing,
It's a skin robe.
a hooded robe,
Yeah.
the hood up over it.
It's made of skin.
Have they made art of this yet? Has someone made
I
art of
don't I
this
haven't
yet?
seen it. If
Okay.
listeners, if there's art of this, send to us immediately.
Yes, please. Super tall, gangly with a skin cloak, no mouth, and a beard. Love it.
Totally normal.
And moves in jerky, snapping motions
Yeah.
because he's tightly wound.
I love the looks that they got from the people were before Chris revealed himself.
Yeah,
Like everyone's staring at them, and then the text is perfect here. It's like this is not the time to be revealing a monster in the party.
yeah. And
Hey,
it
it's Chris.
specifically says he like dropped his cloak, which I interpreted to mean like he walked out amongst them and then turned off Kenzie's cloaking device,
Right.
meaning he just kind of like morphed into being towering above them.
Yeah. He's just suddenly there.
Yeah,
Oh man.
awesome.
So wonderful.
So now they get to walk 10 minutes to the meeting place, and meanwhile, Kenzie casually hacks into the town's surveillance system.
Cool.
Yep.
Just doing that.
Yep. So they meet up with Nursery, Lord of Loss, and Bitterpill, plus others that Victoria doesn't recognize. None of them are exactly friendly, but none of them fit the descriptions of the violent ones that she knows about.
Yeah, more subtle clues that are kind of filling in the pieces of what this place is like. Seeing capes here that we've seen in other places, like hints that as Hollow Point collapsed, some of the capes fled and went other places, but not all of them. I think the indication that there are none of the violent Hollow Point capes here kind of shows that Lord of Loss might have a zero tolerance like policy, like his way goes. Like none of the more reckless and unhinged ones are here. And so we're drawing a big distinction between this villain hideout and the villain hideout that we saw earlier in the book.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we see some handful of capes are having a stare down with Capricorn. We don't get to figure out what this is about, though.
Yeah, I think this is like low key one of my favorite parts of the chapter though, because like it's clearly we're clearly setting things up for the future. But I love how the stare down is written. We're finally like we're preparing the readers to finally maybe get some information on Tristan and his past. But for now, we're just left with this very like visceral stare contest between these two sides. I mean, look at this. Three men were staring us down. They wore simpler costumes with maximized utility belts between between the belts, pouches, and bandoliers they'd strapped on. As I walked past, I realized that they weren't focused on me, on Chris, or Luxie. Sveta was between me and Capricorn. They were looking at him or her. Not her, I realized. I saw past the eye slit in Capricorn's helmet and saw his sharp focus on the same men. Sveta didn't seem to notice them. Okay. Like, I love the way that we eliminate who it is one by one. Like, we start, it's not this person, not this person, not this person. Okay, it's one of these two. No, it's not this one. We eliminate them one by one, and we're finally left with Tristan. I think that shows how impactful this is. And then it's confirmed via Tristan's involvement, via his sharp focus, his staring back. And then later we have a moment where Capricorn barely paid attention to the power that was sweeping over him. He was focused wholly on the three men that had been staring at him earlier. So this is something huge here. Like, he's being examined by a person and is ignoring that to just stare at these guys. And we've done such a good job here of establishing, like, this is big. This is big. Whatever this is going to be, it's big.
Yeah, right. It's like anything that gets under Tristan's skin this much is, definitely very fascinating to us as readers at this point.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen him, with the exception of around Moonsong, I don't think we've ever seen him like this, like focused and still, and like it's something's big here.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we'll just have to see what it turns out to be. So yeah, this guy comes and he scans them, making sure there are no traps and making cryptic remarks about Chris. He then asks their team name and their cape names, so they're forced to think of those now.
Yeah, surprise. So before we get into those names, I just wanted to say how much I loved this whole interaction. The idea that Lord of Lost has this minion that will, like, powers wise pat down the good guys before they can meet with them. The idea that he has to announce their name and their titles. We even have this little comedic 3-beat where we cut back to Kenzie, like, slowly removing a ridiculous amount of gadgets and gizmos from her pockets, like so many of them. And this is very much playing in tropes. Like, this is a meeting with the boss ruler of a territory. It's a scene that if you've read books or watched TV or watched movies, you've probably seen many times. The pat down, the removal of weapons, the announcement. This is something that is used a lot in story, but it still works really well. And this, Matt, is why I hate the word cliche, because, like, tropes work because they're effective. Like, they do, like, using tropes here to describe this whole situation, like, does something very effective. It quickly establishes the scenario to the level of which the reader can understand it. We know exactly what is going on here. We know exactly why it's going on because we've seen this many times before. Tropes can be useful in storytelling when used correctly, and they are here, and I think it works here.
Yeah, what's funny is I didn't even, like, consciously register the whole, like, Kenzie emptying a comical amount of stuff out of her pockets as being that particular trope until you pointed it out, which is always, like, tells me that's, oh, you used the trope correctly because I didn't notice it was the trope.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, even if you notice it, I think you can use them well, because if you're paying attention, you notice a lot more tropes, but that doesn't mean that they're bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a really effective setup and use of trope to establish the stakes and the situation and the scenario and everything that's going on here. We get it right away.
Yeah. All right. So, Scott, we're about to go into our names of all of our characters. So let's not wait till we get to the end of the chapter. Let's do this name game thing right now.
All right. It's time for the name game. The time where we Google things on Wikipedia
Yeah.
and make ourselves seem like we came up with them.
Yep. Make it seem like we did a lot of research. So Looksee decides that she is going to be Lookout.
I didn't see that coming. Did you? The name change? I thought out of all our people here, Kenzie was the one who seemed to have the name thing down pretty pat.
No, I didn't see it coming. But I get it now that she's made the change.
Yeah. We had someone on Twitter as I was live tweeting mention something that I thought was pretty great. Asgar Zeigel pointed out that Kenzie was around when the team was discussing childhood cape names with Tattletale's group, and how kind of embarrassing it was for kids to pick names when they were young and then grow up and have like these kiddie sounding names as adults. So on one level, it seems like Lookout is a more adult version of her name that sounds less kiddie. Looksee kind of has a kiddie ring to it, and Lookout doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because she takes it in reference to this joke where she, you know, what she did with the Fallen Camp.
Oh, you mean the attempted murder?
Yes, but also like it's it's actually, so it's like a more defensive, less offensive name, unless you think about that specific reference, because like Looksee means I'm gonna go take a look-see, I'm gonna go poke my nose around,
Yeah,
and spy. Lookout means that you are defending the home base, you're looking out for your friends, you have your eyes outward from, you know, some point of defense. So I mean, obviously it's just a name, but it does have some connotations, and it makes her a little bit less, you know, voyeur themed and more like defensive themed. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it also makes Chris happy.
Yeah.
Because it was his joke, and and I like this. Like, it seems to be a very Kenzie thing to do, to recognize that Chris is in a bad mood. He just had this argument with Victoria. Like, we had this whole thing where Kenzie was very upset that there was a fight between Chris and Victoria. She was not happy about it, and so she wanted to help in any way she could. And picking this name is like a way of saying, "Hey, Chris, I liked your joke. Here you go," and it makes Chris happy. It works.
Yeah.
I wonder how Ashley would feel about this. Hey, remember that time I totally almost murdered people, and you were really upset at me about it? Well, I've embraced it now.
Yeah. It's my identity now. I mean, I think hopefully she sees that it's an attempt to make a new beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sveta chooses Tress.
Yeah, which is something that sounds pretty, but it's not really something she's in love with. She's kind of forced to make a choice here, and she makes one. A tress, by the way, is a long lock of women's hair, which is probably the most positive, optimistic way to view Sveta's tentacles.
Yeah. I mean, they do kind of trail off from her head like hair, so that's yeah.
I like it. I like the name.
I like it. Yeah, I like it too. And it goes along with kind of the aesthetics and the fact that she is an artist, you know, like that she paints her costume. She's just an artist in general. It makes sense that she would focus on the appearance rather than like the function, you know, not like grabber or something. Like she'd go for something, a beautiful sounding word that means a beautiful sounding thing.
Yeah.
Chris will be the previously discussed cryptid.
Chris's name was perfect the first time we saw it, and it remains perfect now. It's a great name. A cryptid, for those that don't know, is an animal whose existence is either disputed or unsubstantiated. So Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, chupacabras, stuff like this.
Hold on now, chupacabras. Those are real, Scott.
Sure they are.
And then Victoria finally chooses her name. And now we get to see if we're gonna pronounce it right. Antares.
That's probably pretty good, especially when we learn its origin.
Yeah. Well, what's its origin?
So this was a big surprise for me. I don't think anyone who is offering up ideas for what Victoria's name would be would have guessed that it would be a star in the Scorpio constellation. Did not see that coming. Victoria says she has a very specific reason for choosing it, but it's one that she doesn't have time to explain. So let's see if we can figure it out, Matt.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So Antares, also known as Alpha Scorpii, is the brightest star in the constellation and the 15th brightest star in the night sky. It's reddish when viewed by the naked eye, and as Tristan said, is also called the heart of the scorpion because, like, it's at the center of the constellation.
Yeah.
Antares is so named because of a rough translation of ancient Greek that basically means rival to Ares or opponent to Mars. Most likely because of its red hue matched that of the red planet. Ares and Mars, of course, are the Greek-Roman god of war. So Victoria positioning herself as the opponent to war would be certainly thematically interesting, wouldn't it?
Yes, certainly.
However, some scholars also think the star could have been named after an Arab war hero, Antara ibn Shaddad, famous for both his poetry and his adventurous life. The dude fell in love with his cousin, and they got married after he was freed from slavery, and then did a bunch of adventuring and questing and wrote a bunch of poems. He's been described as like the Eastern world equivalent or the Middle Eastern world equivalent of the Legend of King Arthur, so pretty big deal. I don't know if this really sheds any light on Victoria. I just thought it was cool.
Well, Scott, every time we like skim over something in our name analysis, Wildbow's like, "Oh, you forgot the secret meaning." So I think it's good. I think someone pointed out there was some like Leo Scorpio thing going on with Victoria having this connection to like a lion through like a stuffed animal lion, and I wasn't exactly I don't know anything about horoscopes or zodiac or anything, and I couldn't really figure it out. Every time you type these things into Google, it's just like Google tells you Scorpio and Leo are good together in bed, so I guess that's good.
Nice.
Yeah. But I wasn't able to make any particular headway there. I think I also read somewhere, and I may be wrong about this, but that this is like one of the brightest stars. So not only is it one of the brightest stars in the sky, it's also one of the largest stars, like in that we know of.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with Victoria per se, but I think it's an interesting fact.
Yeah, I mean, this is really cool, and I'm sure she's gonna have a very interesting explanation for why she picked it. But I can see it circling around all these different things.
Yeah. Also, it's going to supernova sometime within the next like 1,000 years or something.
Oh.
So hopefully that's not foreshadowing of any kind.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, maybe it's 100,000 years. I don't know. Relatively short astronomical time frame. Yeah. So and we're gonna have to figure out if it's Antares or Antares. But anyway.
Let's just say Anti-Ares.
Anteaters.
I'm just gonna call her Anti-Ares.
Anteaters.
There we go.
So the team quickly settles on Breakthrough for their team name, largely because it was the name that Swansong liked.
All right, this is it. Rest in peace, Misfit Toys.
Yep.
I'm still totally gonna use it. But I for some reason, Matt, every time I hear the word breakthrough, I think of the Queen song "I Want to Break Free," and so the entire day when I was working on prep for this podcast, I was hearing that song in my head over and over again. I don't know why. It's not break through, it's break free, but that's how my brain works.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Breakthrough's name is pretty obvious, as it psychologically it tracks like what they're hoping to achieve as a team, but also it describes their goals of cracking tough nuts, they say. I really enjoy that beat where it's the one that Ashley liked, as it's like a homage to their teammate and friend that is gone now. I guess we don't care if Rain liked it because he's gone too. We don't talk about him.
Yeah, that's funny. I just hope that there's not some like tense hero situation where the Chevaliers, like we need a team capable of smashing through this giant obstacle quickly. I don't have time to think. Get team breakthrough over here. I'm sure they'll be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, if when Rain comes back, they can like chop it
Yeah.
down.
Also, Ashley.
Oh yeah,
Those
that's
two
true.
guys are good at
Ashley's
breaking through
perfect. Yeah.
things
We need
physically,
Ashley
actually.
back.
And also Victoria could probably. Anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
so
So just rope. Let's just delete it.
let's
We'll
just
cut it. We'll cut it.
yeah, scratch that. So they announce themselves to Lord of Loss in his giant badass form. LOL says that he'll choose 4 people he trusts to stand with him so they can talk. And he calls his people amongst him, and the man that he calls is Marquisque.
Oh shit! Marquise is back. Remember when everyone was like, "Is Chris going to be able to calm down enough to handle this situation?" What we should have been asking was, what will Victoria do now that Marcus Swiss is in the mix?
And I guess we'll find out next week.
I guess we will. I tried really hard not to laugh while saying those names.
Me too. Me too. All right. So this week's discussion question is as follows. So one of the biggest recurring themes of the Parahumans universe has been the importance of names. Everyone from Yamada to Lord of Loss to Victoria herself has an opinion on the names that we are assigned from birth versus the names that capes give themselves. Describe what you think Worm and Ward's central name thesis is and how Team Breakthrough's name selections enforce that thesis.
Or enforce or modify.
Yeah.
Just whatever.
Or anything tangential to those sequence of words.
Yeah. Here's your essay question. I expect 2 pages, double spaced.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right. And that's
something I've actually been wanting to talk about for a long time. So I thought it'd be good just to phrase it as a question to get everyone else's thoughts before I go on my probably 2-page speech.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually very curious to see what the answers are here because I know that there's a lot to be said here. This is a situation where I'm just like, yeah, I have my thoughts, but I'm certain that by like crowdsourcing this question, we can get much like richer discussion than if it was just like, oh yeah, they talk about names a lot, huh? Yeah. So that is all we've got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on Twitter at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaly85 and Matt's is at Marquos.
And if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
As always, you can find this, all the other podcasts we do, and all of our writing, essays, film, and TV criticism, and more at dailyplanetfilms.com. This week on Vow to View, Elise and I talk about our favorite dog movies in celebration of the release of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. That doesn't make a lot of sense unless you have my wife's brain. Also, we should hopefully have a brand new episode of We've Got Weaver Dice here pretty soon, I think.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms. If you can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford, supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art contest, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks to new Planeteer, Lynn and Ziager at the $1 level, and Kryptonian Roman upgraded to the $20 level. That's awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Y'all are the best.
Yeah, and as always, make sure that you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
And if you can't afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can fly all over to an orphanage and just start talking to random orphans about We've Got Ward. It's how it works.
Yeah.
Or you can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. This week's review comes from Jazriel, who gives us 5 stars and says, Matt and Scott's studious pacing allows for a more attentive perusal of Wildbow's works than most readers invest, yielding profound insights into their essential themes thereof. They bring to bear years of critical experience, mix the genuine chemistry from their banter in, and you've got dozens of episodes to enjoy. There's a reason this is the only podcast I've stuck with for more than an episode. Wow, that is a compliment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Jezreel.
Yeah, we really appreciate the kind words and you taking the time to do that review. Really appreciate it. Also, if you want to listen to more podcasts, just hit us up. We got recommendations. I listen to so many podcasts. I could give you more that I promise you'll like.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the podcasts that I listen to are pretty good, actually. All right. That's it for the show this week. Next week, Arc 7 probably continues.
Yay.
Marquise.
So that's the plan going forward, right? We're going to pronounce his name differently every single time.
I hope so. I hope we have the stamina. Marquis. No, never.
Once again, we hit just about an hour and a half.
Yeah. And once again, I realize in the course of the podcast that I'm sick.
Why does that always happen?
I think it's
I saw you suffering over there, and I felt so bad. There's nothing I can do.
So what happened to the video? Not that it matters.
Wait, what do you mean?
On the YouTube, it's like frozen the whole time.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Huh.
Is it still frozen?
I don't think so.
Let me check.
I think it was just you.
But I could see your face moving. Why would only one quadrant of the... No. Oh, maybe it is just me. No, that doesn't make sense. Hold on. No, yeah, my face has been frozen.
Huh, weird. I'm sorry about that.
It doesn't bother me. I mean, I was just wondering.
Know about Chris, but as you said, they're both kind of worried that they'll betray his trust. Sorry you guys didn't get to see Matt talk. That makes me feel bad.
Yeah, well, it's okay. They just saw my face looking slightly confused, as if having heard a sound that I was worried about for the entire episode.
Yeah. You're also a little, you need to move your laptop a little bit. You're a little low.
Yeah.
Your chin's getting cut off here.
It's probably because I'm all slumped over now.
I'm in the same room I'm always in. I just moved my setup around. I'm still in the room. I like my polka dotted shirt. Don't be mean to my polka dotted shirt. The problem is the lights in this room. Like, my nose and my head look so shiny. It doesn't help that I have to turn off the AC in Texas in June, and it gets a little hot.
I was just in Texas in June.
Yeah, you were in South Texas in June.
Houstonville, as they call it.
Death, Texas.
Yeah, it was funny because I basically, even though I've lived there for literally most of my life, I was like, is this the Caribbean? Is this a tropical environment? There's all these birds and lush plants, and it's raining all the time.
It's amazing how quickly you forget. Cool. I also hit record. Wow, mine is
stranger in a strange
so
land.
Loud. It's one of those days where I have to edit. And then I have to begin working on putting all the Q&A questions we have. Why did I turn my AC off? Here, I'll turn it back on and you'll know why. This is why I turned the AC off. Because it's loud as hell. By everything in my setup being... I have a Nest, so I turn it on from my phone. They gave it to me for free. Actually, they gave me 2 for free because they messed up. And I kept them both. I'm going to sell one of them. I don't understand why I suddenly got so loud.
In the middle of the episode or what?
No, at the beginning, I hit record and that's exactly what I'm doing. It's weird. It's no hair up here. It's all right here.
It's just a tonsure. Of course Scott has a tonsure.
Oh, those are some fun chapters. I enjoyed that prep.
Yeah.
By everything in my setup being different.
Says my thing's gonna take 20 more minutes.
Cool. You get to entertain everyone.
Yay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the theater
of the real.
Of the real. Did you know that people are now saying that you were just supposed to know that Morpheus was wrong about what the machines intended to do with humans, and that he was full of shit when he talked about humans being batteries? People have now just agreed that actually the creators never intended that to be true.
Wait, what?
Even though there's no subtext in the first film indicating that it's not.
Who? Is this another one of those ridiculous Gattaca arguments you were having?
Yes, people are retroactively reinterpreting films to patch over their minor, meaningless inconsistencies that could have just been ignored.
That's annoying.
Yes. Welcome to the internet.
A live stream of Weaver Dice would probably not be fun.
No.
Firstly, because I don't even my setup being different, and some of them have web cameras, and why is this so monsters, loud? Breakthroughs, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this on. The Gattaca one made me physically angry. That was not good for me.
Yeah.
The YouTube series Impulse. I have not seen that. I don't have YouTube Red, so I don't think I can watch any of that stuff.
Yeah, it was weird that all of the bad discussions were centering in the same comment thread. I couldn't really understand why. I think it's just the type of people who are prone to making one terrible interpretation or prone to making all terrible interpretations. I can't fail to do
this for Victoria. I can't fail to do this for Chris. And they have completely different problems, completely different issues. And there's times, Matt, when we're talking and I was checking the sound levels or something weird that's happening on my computer, and then you finish talking, and I don't remember what you said, and I start talking, and I'm like, am I repeating something he just said? And I'm never quite sure. And I just kind of go forward anyway.
Yeah, that happens to me sometimes. Honestly, that's one of the problems with doing it as a live stream is that very often I'll go glance over at the live stream thing because I can't help myself, and then I'll be like, I can't read and listen to Scott at the same time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I am playing a self-serving meathead because I usually love heroic patriotic characters. Because I wanted to do something. I specifically set out to do something different than what I normally play. .8.
yeah,
Victoria
you're
has a heated
usually a
confrontation
cleric
with
type, right?
yeah,
Somebody
paladin.
more helpful.
Yeah. One time I played a rogue, and I still made my rogue like a former paladin, so he was just a guy that used to be really good and then got really shitty, but then his arc was getting good again. So like I can't. That's what I always do. So this time I was like, no, I'm doing something different.
I love it.
And our group, this was our college group. You were there.
Yeah.
That was when our paladin almost got banned from being a paladin because he kept doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, what do we do with this family of innocent kobolds? Burn
Execute
them?
Yeah. I can't remember who was our paladin now. And it doesn't help that almost all of our players were named Michael.
Yeah. It was Michael.
Okay.
It was Michael F.
Okay.
Who pretended like he was too cool for it, but still did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the worst kind of D&D player.
Yeah. I just don't think he really understood what a paladin was.
Yeah, I probably had like no familiarity with the whole deal of how D&D works.
Yeah, but I felt like we explained it to him multiple times, and it just didn't change his behavior at all. It gets its name. Rest in peace, Misfit Toys. Wildbow's world of floppy skin. Thanks for rubbing it in, Slim Jim. But to Victoria, like musing about the mode that driving requires and how flying has its own mode that she has to shift into, and the casual nature of which Victoria's narrative sets this scene up as. You're kind of like, wait, what's going on here? She was fighting, but now she's like casually musing. I still don't understand why. Like, I recorded with this same setup earlier, and it did not get super loud. Don't understand. Kiefer's thing on paladins. This guy. It's shocking that Mr. Rage is very passionate when talking about paladins.
Yeah. I remember reading like the logs of some D&D session where it was like basically they chose to go down this route where the cleric or the wizard or the paladin, I forget who exactly, like summoned a demon, and then the demon was like, actually I want to be good now. And then it basically stopped being a D&D campaign at that point and started being like a debate on ethics, because or even like basic logic, because this is like, well it's D&D. Demons can't want to be good and can't be good because they're demons, and that's how the universe is structured. Is there's good and evil, and good and evil are ontologically basic quantities.
That's great.
and I don't know if they ever actually resolved it, but I remember it being both funny and interesting.
I'm really excited about our next episode of Weaver Dice.
Yes.
And I can't decide if what I meant by that was the one that they haven't heard yet or the one that we're gonna do.
I'm excited about finishing that one and getting it out because I think people are going to like it.
Yeah.
Just so you know, it's Michael's fault for making an extremely complex task for me in terms of editing.
Yeah. I fully support the blaming of Michael. But it's gonna be great. I'm proud of how my stuff went in it. I think I've gotten a pretty good handle on my character.
Yeah.
Pretty excited.
Yeah.
So it's so fun. It's so fun to do. I need to be jerks more often. I'm not gonna spoil anything. You're gonna get nothing from me. Did you see that Patreon added a benefits thing?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
It's so helpful. It literally says no more keeping your own spreadsheets. And I was like, yay, because I hate keeping that spreadsheet.
Yeah. I wonder. They probably just got a lot of people asking for that.
Yeah. It's a good company, man. With the exception of the dumb thing they did in December, I'm pretty happy with this company.
Yeah. It seems to process faster if I actually keep it as my main screen, so I'm going to do that for a minute. It's probably an illusion.
Yeah, and like December, I think they meant well. It's kind of like Victoria. They had the best intentions. They just executed very poorly.
Yeah.
But I've been going to their monthly. They have monthly hangouts where you talk with like a stream session with the CEO, and they've got plans on making things better, and they seem supportive and listening to people. So I'm pretty happy. Tex is my favorite character too. I know I'm probably not supposed to say that because I'm one of them, but he is.
You're all my favorites. You're all my children.
Aw, that's cop out. Matt, have you finished American Gods yet?
Depends on what time frame you're talking about.
Have you finished American Gods for this month's book club yet?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I started it though. Look, see here's
That's good.
the start.
That makes one of us.
It's okay. It's just next week.
It's just next. I've read it before. Got a whole week. I remember what happens.
Do you though?
There's some gods. There's a guy.
This is gonna be a riveting conversation. This is what the people come for. American Gods. There are some gods in America.
There's the main god guy, and there's the other god guy. I think they have to fight or something.
There's the secret god guy.
Spoilers.
Okay, that's not. Hey, there's a new patron. Welcome.
Welcome.
Man. Scarf Girl, your drawings are so great. I love them so much.
Yeah. Those are pretty cool.
Later. You changed your name. Oh, Vincent Anton Freeman. That's good. Well done.
Had to.
I didn't know you didn't know they were the Freemans. Yeah,
I probably did and then forgot. But yeah.
It's huge, man.
Yeah,
Freemans.
I know. I'm sure that doesn't mean anything.
No, not at all. Sure, free man has no meaning.
No.
Oh, we forgot to talk about Chris's last name.
Yeah. Yeah, can't believe it.
He's Chris the Man.
Chris the Man. That's not a fake name.
Oh, I saw Pitch 4 and thought that was yours. We're not on Pitch anymore. Yeah, I'm sure it did come up. I just, for some reason, this is the time where I was like laughing at L-Man.
Yeah, I think Scott pointed it out this time. And then I was like, yeah, that's funny. I need to find out how to get a crowbar engraved with a message that says, "Good evening, Dr. Freeman," so I can get it to my brother when he graduates.
That's good. Wait, he hasn't graduated yet? I thought he had.
No, he's going to graduate in December probably.
Oh. But he's a Googler now.
Yeah,
He changed his Facebook.
I know. Well, he's in a residency, which, much like being a doctor, means that you are probably going to actually get a real job.
Whatever, Google.
Yeah, they're too cool to just give people jobs at Google.
Yeah.
We say using several Google tools to have this conversation.
I could not survive without the Google tools.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. I see. It would make so much more sense, Kiefer, for the song for me to think of. It would be the Doors song. Like, why wouldn't that be the song? But for whatever reason, my head goes to Queen. I don't know.
All right. Audio incoming any second now.
I'm so excited. So excited to edit this podcast. Do you think Daniel is going to want to be on the Incredibles episode with us?
Probably.
I made the discussion question too long. I apologize.
It's okay.
It's just when you have a question, you just type it.
Better that way. I'm dying.
I think, Matt, I have some news.
What's
I
that?
think you're allergic to podcasting.
I think I'm allergic to having babies. Which
Isn't
is
everybody?
luckily something that eventually stops. It's a self-solving problem. put the audio in there.
Cool. All right. We're probably gonna. Are you sure it's in here? There it is.
Yeah.
I found it. All right, guys, we're gonna shut it down so Matt can go rest his sick little head.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Yeah, we've got our Q&A session tomorrow for those of you at that level, so look for that.
Yes. Thank you for accommodating my travel in the reschedule, everyone, including Scott.
I happy to. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out, and we will talk to you all later. Matt's not frozen anymore.